to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
It's Ebro, Laura, and Rosenberg. Good morning. Welcome to the program. And today's guest, Cedric Richmond. Cedric, what is your official title, sir?
I don't know. Director of Public Engagement, Senior Advisor to the President.
There it is. Tell us how these first 3 months have been going for y'all.
Look, I think they've been going good. We started on day one with some things that the president said he was going to do, so he did them. For example, racial equity, executive order all throughout government, reversing the Muslim ban, doing a whole bunch of things in that area. And then the other focus was to help people who are hurting because of the pandemic, not just the health pandemic, but the economic crisis. So we passed a $1.9 trillion bill, and most of the focus of that $1.9 trillion went to working people or people who want to be working, but through no fault of their own, they're not. And so we believe we're living up to all of the commitments we made on the campaign trail. And, you know, of course, I visited your show and had many conversations with you, but we really believe that our focus has been on people who are busting their butts to keep a roof over their head, clothes on their back, and food on the table. And so that was the goal of the American Rescue Plan, and we think we achieved it.
Now, Cedric, I was privy to be on a call. I talked about it on the air prior to the vaccine rollout. Myself, it was other brothers from Black Men from Media, and yourself, talking about this vaccine. And there was a lot of questions. It was a private call, but we were okay to give the audience some of the conversation. And we talked in depth about the fear around the vaccine, about this administration communicating and understanding and being empathetic to the fear around the vaccine. Those conversations that you're having with the Black community, Black men specifically, how are you going about communicating that back to the administration, and how's the information being received and worked into policy?
We knew from the beginning that there was going to be real skepticism, especially among African-American males, young African-American males, about taking the vaccine. And, I guess the academic term is quote unquote vaccine hesitancy. But the real life issue is that it's our experience with government. And so what we've really been doing is listening and being as transparent as we can. Look, there are a whole bunch of questions. One, the vaccine was developed in about 10 months. Under an administration that had a propensity for not telling the truth. So people didn't have any sense of confidence that what they were hearing was truthful. So what we're trying to do is be as transparent as possible. The answers we know, we answer. The ones we don't know, we don't make it up. And so that's why it was important for the future Surgeon General to be on the phone with people like you so that you all could ask the hard questions. And, think back to Tuskegee experiment, all of these other things. That's why it was important for the president to take it on TV and for the vice president to also take it. And I've had my 2 shots already too. It's safe, but what it really does is allow you to protect your loved ones. And so if you love your mother and father or your grandparents, if you're lucky enough for them to still be alive, the responsible thing is to be vaccinated if you're going to go around them, because they have the hardest time surviving COVID-19, and you don't want to be the one to give it to them. And so we're going to keep being as transparent as possible in terms of any side effects, any long-term effects of it, which we have not seen any so far. And the CDC has been pretty good in terms of their thoroughness. So we're just going to continue to advocate and educate on why it makes sense to do it and share the science behind it. And so if you remember on the call, Dr. Murthy went into the science behind how it was created and all of those things, because we really want people, especially people like you, we don't want you to just take our word for it. We want you to actually hear the science behind it, then come to a decision, because, if you don't believe in it, we're not asking you to go blow up your street credibility. What we're asking you to do is really get informed on it. And if you get comfortable enough on it, to then decide to tell people that after you've done your research, you think it's something that they should do. And I think it's something that people should do.
So what do you say to people who are like, let's say, for example, our brother who's sitting right here right now, Shawnee Culture, is a skeptic, doesn't believe the research is there.
Cedric, he's our producer behind the scenes. He's a skeptic.
And he
okay.
And then on top of that, with very good reason, as a black American, has his doubts, his lack of trust for the American government when it comes to something like this. What do you say to people who feel that way and do have both trepidation and some legitimate reason to have a history of concern?
Look, I would just ask them not to judge us on past administrations or past actions of the federal government. I would say judge us on what we've done. And so if you just look at what we've done since we have been in office, we did everything we said we were going to do. We're helping people who are struggling. We're very transparent about the vaccine. We're leading by example in terms of taking it ourselves. We're providing Dr. Fauci and Dr. Murthy. We have a whole COVID equity team in the White House to make sure that, one, minorities can get the vaccine, and two, that we're taking into account all of those factors that create that hesitancy. And you'll see a whole ad campaign going on it. But what I would just say is, President Biden has been as authentic as you can be. And sometimes he gets criticized for just, saying, first thing that comes to his mind, but he's genuine and he's honest about it. And we would not ask the American people to take this vaccine if we didn't think it was safe, if it was not tested. I certainly would not have taken it, and my mother and family. And so we can't get everybody in the lab to show them all of the science that went into it. But we are doing our best to educate people on this is not the Tuskegee experiment. This is not us playing loose with the facts. This is not us asking you to trust Donald Trump and his science. It's trust the Biden administration, the Harris administration, and what we have been trying to do to get in front of this pandemic, cure the country, and move us forward out of the economic crisis that has gone with the health crisis.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's so, from what I hear from people who are hesitant, and I'm one of the people who are also hesitant. I'm mostly concerned, when I look at protecting family members, the older people in my family, making sure that they get the vaccine and protect themselves, right? Because there is no evidence that getting the vaccine would stop me from giving it to someone else, right? Like I could get vaccinated and still carry the vaccine. I won't get sick. I won't go to the hospital, but I can get someone else sick, right? And so I'm trying to make sure that the older people in my family are protected. But the hesitancy, in my opinion, it's not about Trump. It's not about y'all. It's about the American medical system. It's not about the elected officials. I don't think we see you guys as scientists. We see you guys as deliverers of information. We see you guys as people who are trying to make sure that the country opens up so the economy could get back going. Right. It's mostly, and then also with big pharmaceutical companies and big pharma, there's tons of lack of trust there because we know the government is just paying big pharmaceutical for a vaccine. So whatever information that they give and y'all scientists look at and agree upon is safe. That's what we have. That's what we're confronted with. Right.
I think one of the biggest things too is people are concerned also with the long-term effects. Like, that's one of the biggest things that I hear. What are the long-term effects?
Well, so far there are no long-term effects, but let's just get to clearly where the science is showing now. Let's just take the J&J vaccine. It's 100% effective in terms of everyone who's had that vaccine during clinical trials. Not one person was hospitalized, not one person died from it. And so when you think of it in those terms, then it really makes sense. And look, we are concerned about opening up the economy, getting kids back in school and all of those things. But first and foremost is the health and safety of the American people. We would not try to open up an economy just for the sake of the economic gains. That's why we are very serious about masking, asking people to still not open up cities like Texas and Mississippi is doing, because we think we have to get in front of the virus before we do it. But what happened is it was a race to find a vaccine. And then our Centers for Disease Control, along with National Institutes of Health, they they take a real scientific approach to looking at the science behind it, the potential effects of it, and all of those things before they approve it. And so when they approved it, we felt very good about the science and that it was safe. Now, we don't expect any long-term effects of people who take the vaccine. All of the scientists have pretty much concluded that. But for some people, that won't be enough because it hasn't been out there in the atmosphere that long. But all of the science, all of the data that we've looked at, it does not predict any long-term implications or side effects. And, you know, when I had it, the only thing I had was a sore arm. It was a really sore arm. But in the grand scheme of things, especially if you look at African Americans, are 13% of the population, but we are 24% of the people who die from it. My calculation was that it was much more safer and prudent to take it and protect my family than to not take it. I think you're playing Russian roulette if you don't. And I think that since it's based on science in terms of taking it, it's a calculated decision that I think is more beneficial, one, to the family, but two, to the country.
Well, now, what I've been communicating to people on our show is, you know, look, the elites don't want us black and brown people dead because we're doing all the essential work. So they're not going to put something out there which is going to force us to be harmed, and they're going to have to do the work. Let's keep it 100, right? 80% of essential workers in New York City are black and brown. That's just the facts. Essential workers across the nation are mostly minority groups. And some of the, and as you just noted, the minority groups being harmed the most by this virus. They, you know, the theys, the elites, the electeds, et cetera, that we often talk about as pedestrian folk. They want us to get back to work, and you know, I know. Listen, it's the right thing, Cedric, and you know, we've talked privately. It's the right thing for the government to say they wouldn't open it up, open the country up just for economic purposes, but the economy is very important. And getting people back to work. People want their kids back to work. People want to go back to work, and they want to go back to school, and they want to feel safe. So I do believe that this is the right path, but I also acknowledge the hesitancy, and rightfully so. And another thing that we've communicated on this program is you are going to have to make the tough decision, like you just articulated, Cedric, about you know, protecting your family and making the smart choice based on the information that you have in front of you, so that things can get back going.
Look, you're right. And the other thing we did in passing the American Rescue Plan is we decided that we were going to prioritize, one, frontline workers, but two, people who have been just working that can't get ahead, and this pandemic has exacerbated their pain. So in one bill, we're going to reduce child poverty by 50% in this country.
That's right.
We're going to reduce poverty in the Hispanic community by 39%, in the Black community by 34%, and the Asian American Pacific Islander community by 22%. So if you think about it this way, when the Republicans and Trump spent $1.9 trillion, they spent it to give the top 1% of the country a tax cut. We spent $1.9 trillion a couple weeks ago to give that money to the 85% of the people in the country that are busting their butts just to make ends meet and that are surviving. And we are laser focused on figuring out a way to lift up the bottom of the economic ladder, because we know how hard they're working. We know how unfair the system is. You shouldn't work 40 hours a week and still live in poverty. That just shouldn't happen. And so that's where our focus is. And so what we're asking people to do is buy into what we're doing. And that is, we are laser focused on helping improve the lives of average everyday people. And that is, one, with vaccine, making sure their health is safe, making sure that we protect them in that sense. But two, protecting them health-wise is one thing, but economic security is another. Mm-hmm. You know, kids shouldn't be destined to failure because we're not funding public schools in inner cities or in poor neighborhoods, which is why we're going to triple Title I funding, give more money to HBCUs, all of those things. But what we're asking people to do is just watch what we do, because we're going to wear our values on our sleeves, and we're going to lead by example. And so that's why passing that $1.9 trillion bill was so important to us. And we weren't going to wait for Republicans to see the light. The good news is that 50% of Republicans in the country supported it. Overwhelming Democrats and independents supported. The only people that didn't support it were Republicans on Capitol Hill, and we were not going to let them stand in the way of giving people help when we know how many people out there are hurting. And so that's going to be the philosophy of this Biden-Harris administration, and we're just asking people to judge us by our actions.
It's clear in the bill, especially with what was done for Black and Latino farmers in the bill. I don't know if that was given a lot of attention, but I think it should be, because Black farmers, are losing their land and been, racially ostracized from farming through banking and support, financial support from the government, unlike other farmers. And so there was some allocations for Black farmers in the American, is it called the American Rescue Plan? Is that the official name?
The American Rescue Plan. Yeah, we put $5 billion in there to right the historical systemic racism that has existed in agriculture in this country. And so not only will people have the ability to waive 100% of their loan, they can waive 120% of the loan, which means they get a check back. And it is the beginning of us fixing a system that has punished Black and brown farmers since the beginning of Black people owning land and farming. And so when we said that we were going to be serious about racial equity and breaking down systemic racism, I think people thought President Biden was joking. But I think that now when you see $5 billion, the largest of all time, going to something like this, I think people should be wide awake and clear that we're going to keep doing it. We don't care about the backlash. And it's refreshing to have a president that uses the words racial equity, racism, poverty, and all of those things, because he's not afraid to address it or say it.
Can you give us an update on HR 40, which is the reparations study and the reparations bill? I believe that's Sheila Jackson Lee's bill. And
it was John Conyers' bill. Sheila has taken the mantle on it. We expect the House of Representatives to pass it. We expect it to go to the Senate, and that bill will create the commission to study reparations and what it could and should look like, and then it would be on the Congress to actually pass it. We support HR 40, but what we're saying is that we can't wait for the study. We support the study. We want it done, but we can't wait on it. So we have to start righting and repairing the damage right now. And so that's why you saw us do an executive order in Department of Housing and Urban Development to go look at the systemic racism in home ownership and housing, to make sure that we fix that, because we know that that's the greatest way to transfer wealth to the next generation is through home ownership. You see us with the Black farmers, and you see us consistently everywhere we go trying to repair that damage and do things right now, because we know that the Black community can't wait on a study, which we support, but we need action now also. Right. So it's a belt and suspenders approach.
Police reform, qualified immunity. I know there's the defund the police. Then there's Biden saying, hey, we need to give more resources to police, but there needs to be a better look at how we make people safe. What is the language going forward, and what is the action going forward, specifically about reimagining safety, but also removing this qualified immunity at the local level so that the federal government can step in and deal with these corrupt white supremacist cops?
Look, the president issued a statement in support of the George Floyd Act going over to the Senate. He's asked the Senate to act in a quick way so that he can get a bill that he can sign. He wants to see policing reform in this country, but it's no secret that he also said that he thinks we need to invest more money in community policing. If you want de-escalation training, if you want sensitivity training, if you want body cameras on every police officer where we're collecting and storing the data, those things cost money. And that's the idea in terms of real community policing. But we have to create a system that holds police officers accountable, and qualified immunity so far has been a barrier to that. And so I think that there's, in the George Floyd, it amends qualified immunity completely. And so I think that there's real conversations going on about not only qualified immunity, which is the civil portion of it, where a family can collect damages and economic benefit from the pain and loss of financial support, but also Section 242, which is the criminal aspect of holding the police officers accountable. And so we're going to let Congress do their business and figure out where they can get to, because you still have to get to 60 votes. But we support police reform. We're glad that the George Floyd Act got out of the House, and we want the Senate to take it up sooner rather than later so that we can get to a point where we are policing communities of color in a much different manner, in a constitutional manner, in a manner that my children and my friends and others can feel safe in their communities, but two, feel safe in an interaction with the police officer.
One thing I'd like to throw out, and maybe you could take this back to whatever meetings you're a part of. This new money that Biden thinks should go to local police, and where they have better training, et cetera, et cetera. There needs to be transparency and civilian review. And because the real problem in all of this is there's a lack of trust between police and the community. So when new money comes in, how that money's used, how the training takes place, it's all done by consultants who are already on the side of police. They are already being manipulated by police. So I assert that if they want to get this taxpayer money to go support them getting new training, there needs to be a civilian review element, or civilians that need to be involved in the process at every police department if they want this federal support.
Well, there are a couple ways to do it. And look, City of New Orleans, we have a citizen review board, and you see a lot of cities moving to that. But also what you could and should have is a Department of Justice that will use pattern and practice investigations and other things to make sure that policing is done in the manner that it should be done. And, I talk about New Orleans a lot. It's where I'm from. But our police department was also under a consent decree with the federal government because of unconstitutional practices by the department. And so I don't want everybody to just give up on an independent Department of Justice that will right wrongs. And we think that communities should be involved. We think it's stronger when communities are involved in policing, but we're also going to have a Justice Department that actively looks at police departments and other aspects of the criminal justice system to make sure that it's done in a constitutional manner. And DOJ, the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, will enforce those provisions. And we're not going to be apologetic about it, because this is something that we just believe is fundamental.
Cedric Richmond, man, thank you for your time. Great to talk to you again. Thanks for coming on the show. And please keep us up to the time on all the movements, that are happening on behalf of our communities. Voting rights, I know, is under attack state to state. I know you guys are seeing it. I'm glad Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are on the road right now, going city to city, talking to folks. Is the federal government going to be able to protect the Voting Rights Act?
We think so. And H.R. 4 is the extension of the Voting Rights Act. It's named after John Lewis, a trailblazer, and, everything that he meant to this country. But we can't let legacies die, and we have to protect our future. So we expect when the hearings are done I think they're going to have 4 or 5 hearings across the country. You will see H.R. 4 passed out of the House, and then you'll see the weight of the White House and the president in terms of trying to get that legislation passed. And the good thing is President Biden, when he was in the Senate, renewed the Voting Rights Act, I think, twice. And so he knows how important it is. And we see an assault all across the country on Black and brown people's ability to vote. When you lose the election, you don't go change the rules. You either just get better or resigned to the fact that your ideas were not that popular with the people in the country. And Republicans lost the election fair and square, no voter fraud, any of that. But what they've decided to do is the way we'll win the next election is just keep all these black and brown people from voting in these numbers. And we're going to fight that because we know exactly what it is.
That's right.
And we're going to fight in the courts. We'll fight in the halls of Congress. And we're going to fight in the streets in terms of making sure that whatever you do, we're going to be prepared for it. We're going to make sure that people have access and a meaningful right to vote. But those things that are just downright unconstitutional, those things that are discriminatory, and we know what they're doing. So it's no secret that if you decide that you're going to end Sunday early voting, it's not because you want to give people Sunday off. It's because you know that souls to the polls, people leaving black churches and going vote, was something that was very popular, and you're trying to put a barrier in front of us to keep it from happening again. And so part of it is education, part of it is us banding together to fight, and part of it is we have to pay attention to who's out there and who's doing what. So that is, at the top of our mind in terms of what they're doing to get back at black and brown people who took the time, the energy, and risked their lives in the middle of a pandemic to go out and cast their vote. So instead of celebrating the fact that more people voted in American history during a pandemic, they're deciding to go out and punish people because they couldn't win an election. So yeah, we're monitoring it. We're smack dab involved in it, and we're going to help members of Congress and others try to beat these laws back.
And this won't be something that, us as voters, things are happening, but because I don't understand how these bills at the state level can certain states push this stuff through without the voters even knowing what's going on? Like how do we fight as voters?
Well, now that we don't have the Voting Rights Act in place, if we had the Voting Rights Act in place, those changes in a lot of those southern jurisdictions would have to go to Justice Department for pre-clearance or pre-approval. But since the Supreme Court struck down that section of the Voting Rights Act, these legislatures can pass this. That's the scary part. These southern legislatures can go in, pass these bad laws. Now we'll have the ability to sue and take it to court and challenge it. But in the meantime, they're changing the laws. And so we have to stay very vigilant and attentive to this area because
we're in trouble. In short, we're in trouble right this second. We are in dire straits for those voters in Georgia and what some other states they change in Arizona, Florida. We are in dire straits right now.
This is a serious issue that people should pay attention to. And we're going to have to fight in the courts. We're going to have to fight in the legislatures. And, just for those, Trump supporters who said, Cedric keeps using the word fight. No, I don't mean fight like an insurrection, which they did. I mean,
that whole idea of them trying to spin this, there is no historic record of black folks or anybody showing up in violence. All right, y'all white people got to stop that. You know what I'm saying? Every time black people show up and vote, these white people in angry white mobs show up and start tearing up black neighborhoods, and this time they showed up and tore up the Capitol because y'all mad. So stop thinking that when we say fight, all of a sudden it means actual violence. We should be more concerned about y'all.
And so the goal is we really have to pay attention to what's happening in these state legislatures. We have to pass voting legislation on a federal level to protect all of those people, especially in states where they are rolling back the clock. And, you see it all the time. When we make significant gains, there's always a fierce and ferocious backlash. And this is the backlash of Biden beating Trump. And so, but we're going to protect it. Look, we're going to fight. We're not throwing in the towel. There are avenues for us to seek remedies, and we're going to keep it up. But at the same time, we want the public to pay attention to what's happening. And, people are showing you who they are right now. The real thing is to pay attention and recognize who they are so that when elections come around, you can pick different people who want to unite the country as opposed to continuing to divide it based on race.
So we should know that at the federal level, though, this filibuster conversation we keep hearing about that's standing in the way of the Voting Rights Act vote is giving time to the local states to change laws so they can disenfranchise voters, correct?
Well, look, no matter when we pass the voting rights extension, we're going to be able to go back and look at these laws that have passed. The president has called for filibuster reform because he understands what it's doing, especially when you start talking about civil rights, voting rights, and those things that are important to Black and brown and vulnerable communities, important to poor people. We just don't think that one person without any pain should be able to stop that progress. And so the hard part is to make sure that you have the votes in the United States Senate in order to change the filibuster. But the president has said he'd like to see filibuster reform because he knows how important renewing the Voting Rights Act, the Violence Against Women Act, and all of these things that we keep passing in the House of Representatives that just goes over to the Senate to die.
Cedric Richmond, thank you for your time, man. Hopefully we get to have more conversations.
Absolutely,
now,
man.
Does Joe Biden know that we calling him Moneybag Joe because everybody got the stimmy now? Has he heard about Moneybag Joe?
No, look, I didn't even hear about Moneybag Joe until you said it. I was just going to say, I can't wait till the pandemic is over so I can catch the train up to New York and actually do the show in person.
Oh, that would be lovely too. But yeah, they calling him Moneybag Joe.
I'll let him know that when I talk to him today.
Cedric Richmond, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Cedric.
All right. Thank you all.
All right, take care.